tonight on NewsCenter. South Korea writes to the UN sanctions panel to take appropriate measures against North Korea's latest short-range missile launch, while the North's leader orders further nuclear tests. Nuclear ambitions unacceptable. That's a message from Russia and China to North Korea, urging Pyongyang to return to talks. Beijing and Moscow, however, opposed the deployment of THAAD in South Korea. And we remember March 11, 2011, as Japan takes a moment of silence to mark 5 years since the tragic trifecta. Our special report from Japan, NewsCenter, begins right now. It is 8 a.m. in New York, 12 noon in London, and 10 on a Friday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang NewsCenter. Despite being slapped by the strongest set of sanctions yet, the North Korean regime definitely hasn't put the brakes on with its provocations. And Seoul isn't backing down either, calling for action from the UN Security Council over Pyongyang's latest reckless behavior, Thursday's short-range missile launch. Our Connie Kim has the top story tonight.
South Korea is seeking an appropriate response from the United Nations as North Korea forged ahead with a short-range ballistic missile launch on Thursday. An anonymous diplomatic source said Friday that Seoul has sent a letter to the UN Security Council Sanctions Committee on Thursday, New York time. The South Korean government has reportedly emphasized a launch using ballistic missile technology is a violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. Upon receiving the letter, a group of experts under the committee will launch an investigation and report the probe results to the UN Security Council. Japan has sent a similar letter to the committee, and the U.S. is expected to do the same. Sending a letter to the sanctions panel is a weaker response than calling for a sanctions resolution, but has significance in calling attention to the North's provocation. The UN had investigated Pyongyang's short-range missile launches in 2014 upon Seoul's request and announced a statement condemning North Korea's ballistic missile firing. North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles from Hwangju in North Hwanghae province into the East Sea on Thursday that flew some 500 kilometers. Pyongyang stated that Thursday's firing was hypothetically targeted at the enemy's port, where foreign invasion forces enter, leading to speculation to build up that the regime may be aiming to attack the South Korean port cities of Busan or Pohang, that falls within the 500-kilometer range from the North's Hwangju. Washington's nuclear-powered submarines and aircraft carriers enter into Busan port for the annual South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises. The two allies practice a beheading operation aimed at the North's leadership in Pohang. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
As the international community decides how to properly implement and enforce the strongest ever sanctions on North Korea for its nuclear missile provocations, the regime's leader has issued another defiant call ordering readiness for nuclear attacks. Our foreign affairs correspondent, Kwon So-ah.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has ordered officials to prepare for nuclear attacks and continue conducting nuclear tests. According to the North state-run Korean Central News Agency Friday, Kim made the remarks while attending a ballistic rocket launch exercise. He reportedly ordered officials to further develop and diversify nuclear capabilities to commence nuclear strikes against enemies on the ground, in the air, at sea, and underwater. Seoul's government called the North's threat a, quote, ignorant and rash act.
It exemplifies why strong comprehensive sanctions on North Korea, which the international community is working on right now, are needed. The government is prepared to respond immediately to any provocations by North Korea.
Just earlier this week, North Korea claimed to have successfully miniaturized a nuclear warhead, publishing a photo of it in the North's daily Nodong Sinmun. Pyongyang's recent moves come in the wake of international efforts to bring an end to the state's nuclear and missile programs, as sanctions have been tightened on the regime. Denuclearization is expected to be tabled for discussion in Washington Friday, as South Korea's representative to the stalled six-party talks, Kim Hong-gyun, will meet with U.S. officials, including his U.S. counterpart, Song Kim. Upon arrival, Seoul's top nuclear chief told reporters that it's not an appropriate time to talk about dialogue with North Korea.
South Korea and the U.S. agree that denuclearization is the highest priority for any talks with North Korea, and that the current focus should be on sanctions.
The statement reaffirms Seoul and Washington's opposition to China's two-track proposal of holding peace talks with Pyongyang alongside talks on denuclearization. North Korea had been calling on the U.S. to replace the Korean War Armistice Agreement with an official peace treaty. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Nuclear ambition unacceptable is the message from China and Russia to North Korea. The foreign ministers of the two countries urged Pyongyang to give up its nuclear program and return to the talks. They also once again reaffirmed their opposition to the deployment of the U.S. anti-missile defense system known as THAAD in South Korea. Kim Mo-gyun has this report.
The foreign minister of China and Russia met in Moscow on Friday and announced their common stance against the deployment of the advanced U.S. anti-ballistic missile defense system, THAAD, in South Korean soil. At a joint press briefing following the talks, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi also urged North Korea to return to the negotiating table and abide by the new UN Security Council resolution. The Chinese foreign minister said that deploying THAAD in South Korea goes beyond defensive purposes and that it will trigger an arms race that could intimidate regional security. Lavrov also claimed that Moscow shares a common position with Beijing on the deployment of THAAD and added that they will continue to insist their view in international scenes, including the UN. Regarding the latest set of sanctions imposed by the UN Security Council on North Korea, both ministers said that the punitive measures should be earnestly implemented, but pointed out that humanitarian assistance on the people of North Korea should not be affected. With the latest set of nuclear and missile threats from Pyongyang, Seoul and Washington began official discussions on the deployment of the THAAD battery in South Korea last week. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Now, increasing threat of cyber terrorism from North Korea. South Korea's intelligence service has confirmed that the number of cyber attacks from North Korea has doubled over the past month. Kwon Jang-ho has this report.
At a closed-door parliamentary briefing, South Korea's National Intelligence Service informed several lawmakers about recent cyber attacks carried out by North Korea. Around 300 government and military officials were sent emails pretending to be from the presidential office, as well as the foreign and unification ministries. The emails contained malicious software, and the intelligence agency said 40 smartphones were infected. Through the malware, hackers were able to obtain phone records and text messages, as well as listen in to phone conversations.
When these smartphones get hacked, all the information in them is exposed, and it's the consequences from that information leak that becomes a worry.
North Korean hackers also attempted to access the computer systems of South Korea's rail networks and financial institutions, but they were successfully stopped by the agency. The number of cyber attacks from North Korea were said to have doubled over the last month, and the intelligence agency said there are hundreds of thousands of cyber attacks or hacking attempts made on a daily basis. Although most of them are stopped, about 1 to 2% fall through the cracks. The NIS stressed the need for an anti-cyber terrorism bill. However, the bill is currently being stalled by the opposition party due to fears that it would allow the intelligence service to have access to private data of South Korean people as well.
The NIS made a request to lawmakers to pass the anti-cyber terrorism bill quickly so that we can suitably defend against cyber terror and hacking.
The intelligence agency warned, with the recent sanctions that have been imposed on North Korea, further cyber attacks and other provocations, such as missile launches, cannot be ruled out. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Now, in domestic politics, the People's Party appears to be on the verge of a split after launching just a month ago. Meanwhile, the ruling Saenuri Party, dealing with its own internal issues, unveiled a third list of potential candidates for the April elections. Our political correspondent Ji Myung-gil has the latest.
Co-leader Chun Jung-bae of the People's Party threatened to defect from the party on Friday if An Cheol-soo, the founder and co-leader of the People's Party, does not accept a merger with the main opposition Minju Party of Korea. Kim Han-gye, the head of the election planning committee of the People's Party, quit his post on Friday in protest of An's rejection of the alliance proposal. However, co-leader An was adamant that he would continue rejecting the merger proposal.
Our goal is to create a three-way party system in the run-up to the April 13th election. Once victory is achieved, we can make the assembly functional again and end the constant political infighting.
The merger proposal was initially introduced by the current interim leader Kim Jong-un of the Minju Party last week, when he invited politicians who quit the party earlier to return. An himself left the party late last year after a split with then-chairman Moon Jae-in and promised to block the ruling Saenuri Party from gaining a majority in the upcoming election. Meanwhile, the Saenuri Party blamed the opposition blocs for holding up legislative affairs, although another extra parliamentary session kicked off on Friday.
The opposition bloc has been busy with changing names, creating a new party and looking good for the elections while neglecting key livelihood and economic bills.
With much of the focus being shifted to the upcoming general election, the Saenuri Party announced its third round of candidates to compete in 62 districts, with no incumbent lawmakers being eliminated. The Minju Party also issued its second round of candidates to run in 107 districts, eliminating 2 more incumbent lawmakers from running in the April election. The People's Party unveiled its list of 49 candidates on Wednesday. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
Over in New York, Korean survivors of Japan's wartime sex slavery and a number of UN bodies are calling for a victim-centered approach in dealing with the human rights violation. Our Oh Soo-young has this report.
Japan has shown defiance towards a statement made by a UN human rights official who used the term sex slaves in reference to Korean women who were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. During a council session on Thursday, High Commissioner Zeid Ra'ad al-Hussein said that only the victims of Japan's wartime sex slavery can judge whether they have received genuine redress. In response, Tokyo's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga argued at a press conference held Friday that the remark differed from the response from the international community. He added Tokyo will make its stance better known, as well as protest to the UN official. The Human Rights Council hasn't been the only UN mechanism to address the sex slavery issue. Earlier this week, a report from the UN's Committee on Discrimination Against Women deemed that Seoul and Tokyo's agreement is insufficient and warrants an official apology and compensation. It also called on Japan to refrain from making disparaging statements on the wartime victims. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon will meet with a victim of Japan's wartime sex slavery for the first time. Kil Won-ok, now 89 years old, will consult with the Secretary General on behalf of other victims and submit a petition requesting a formal apology from the Japanese government, as well as lawful compensation. The meeting will take place on Saturday at the UN headquarters in New York. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Well, those that tipped a professional Baduk player or Go player and fellow human Lee Se-do for victory over AlphaGo earlier this week may have underestimated artificial intelligence. Kim Ji-yeon explains why AlphaGo's victories are no fluke.
It seems as if Google's computer program AlphaGo has the capability to learn just like a human. That's because it's based on an artificial intelligence program called deep learning, an information processing technology that imitates human nerve cells. But unlike humans, the program never ceases its continuous learning of Baduk or Go, not even for a second. AlphaGo is an improved version of previous computer programs, which was only capable of pre-programmed moves.
Deep learning is not a new concept in the IT world, but it only has become reality now due to significant improvements in hardware, including faster arithmetic abilities of CPUs, faster internet connectivity, and widespread use of cloud technology, which allows thousands of computers to come together to process and calculate the most optimal move.
AlphaGo is supposed to imitate how humans learn, but it may actually surpass human intelligence in terms of higher learning capacity. AlphaGo practices Baduk some 3,000 times a day, 1 million times in a month. That would take a professional Baduk player 3 games a day for 1,000 years to accomplish the same feat. In fact, it continues to learn even while AlphaGo is playing against professional Baduk player Lee Se-dol.
The improved version of AI is on par with human intelligence, while earlier versions were limited to certain features. In that sense, AlphaGo is an improved AI version that specializes in playing Baduk.
AlphaGo has been programmed to learn 160,000 Baduk game sets and learn to play 1 million Baduk game sets in a month on its own. Google's DeepMind, which developed AlphaGo, says the ultimate goal for the program is to solve real-world problems in the near future, building on the learning process gained from playing Baduk. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
Well, the wait is over. Samsung's latest range of Galaxy smartphones hit the shelves across Korea this morning. Samsung says it focused on adding as many new features as possible and is absolutely confident the new models will break all previous sales records. Our Kim Min-ji introduces the Galaxy 7 series.
Will Samsung's latest smartphones be able to turn the tide in the much saturated smartphone market? After being unveiled to the public last month, the Galaxy S7 and S7 Edge were launched in some 50 countries worldwide on Friday, including its home turf. You can pick up a 32GB Galaxy S7 for $690 in Korea and the S7 Edge for $770, both slightly cheaper than their predecessors. Samsung says they focused on addressing consumers' wants and needs.
Our aim in making the S7 and S7 Edge was to make them much more valuable and comprehensive than other conventional smartphones. We tried to incorporate in the latest models the innovations that consumers wanted in a phone.
So what are some of the features that make the latest models stand out? The glass and metal encased smartphone is water and dust resistant, and it comes with a longer battery, not to mention some of the popular features from its previous models. Samsung has also adopted a dual pixel sensor for the cameras for the first time in smartphone history, which will enhance photo quality to levels of top-notch cameras. Some of the first consumers who came to check out the products had mixed opinions.
I'm happy they brought back the SD memory slot. It really enhances memory capacity.
It looks pretty much the same as the S6. Maybe the functions are better. Honestly, with so many phones on the market today, I don't really think the upgrades justify buying a new phone.
Nevertheless, the tech giant says it's confident that the sales of the Galaxy S7 will surpass that of the previous S6, which sold about 38 million units last year. But with Samsung's local rival LG Electronics soon to launch its new G5, the industry's first modular-type smartphone, which can connect with various accessories to improve sound and enhance camera functions, the world's biggest smartphone maker is in for a tough challenge.
The design's not very different from its previous model, and rather than focus on innovation, it's more like being faithful to the basics. Rather, it's the new LG smartphone that's under the spotlight. The modular smartphone is likely to create a market sensation.
While analysts say the release of the latest models may bring a slight uptick in profits for Samsung's mobile division, they don't have major game-changing aspects that will win over consumers. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Five years ago on this March 11th, Japan was hit by a tragic trifecta, an earthquake, tsunami, and then a nuclear meltdown. Bells rang all across Japan at 2:46 p.m. local time, the exact moment that the 9.0 quake was detected. People across the country took a moment of silence, bowed their heads as a mark of respect for the nearly 19,000 people who died that day. Now, the Japanese government also marked the 5th anniversary in a national ceremony along with residents from the affected regions. On March 11, 2011, the powerful offshore earthquake spawned a monster tsunami along the country's northeastern coast and sparked the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl in 1986. But 5 years on, the wounds have far from healed for those who lived through the tragedy. On the ground, the crisis is not something of the past, but a very much ongoing one that they struggle to cope with today. 5 years since Fukushima, 30 years since Chernobyl. The last of our two-part series from Japan. 2:46 p.m., March 11, 2011. A 9.0 magnitude earthquake rattles Japan, triggering a major tsunami which devastates the northeast coast. Then the tsunami waves reach the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station, resulting in a triple-core meltdown. Explosions, the world's worst nuclear crisis in a quarter century. On this day 5 years ago, nearly 19,000 people were killed or left missing, and 160,000 lost their homes and livelihoods. Tokyo Electric Power Company is the operator of Japan's stricken Fukushima nuclear power plant and has often been under fire for its handling of the disaster. We wanted to ask if the company believed the area surrounding the wrecked plant was safe enough for residents to move back.
The radiation measurement our company is responsible for is limited to the area of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. Not only the government, but the general public has access to these measurements by visiting our website.
TEPCO is fighting a battle of its own as, 5 years on, the operator continues to struggle with cleanup work on site. They still don't know how bad the situation is at 3 of the 4 crippled reactors.
We're trying to find ways to locate the missing melted fuel rods in 3 reactors at the plant. We don't exactly know what the condition is like there. The radiation is too powerful for humans to extract and remove the melted fuel rods. We plan to use remote control robots to do the job.
TEPCO expects decommissioning work to take another 30 to 40 years. Ghost towns surround the plant now, but 5 years later, there are still more than 6,000 workers on ground zero, all of them wearing layers of protection. They're not producing any electricity. They're just cleaning up. Is the nuclear meltdown in Fukushima under control today?
It's not completely underway. You cannot say that. You have to be extremely careful.
Yoichi Funabashi, a former newspaper editor, headed an investigation into the Fukushima nuclear disaster back in 2011, the only investigation not sponsored by the government. Since then, he's been sharing his conclusions at various global events.
We still have 3 meltdown nuclear reactors. You have to also keep cooling that, keep injecting water. Okay? And as a result, we still have a lot of accumulated, contaminated water. So we have to purify that. Okay? And it may take years. So during that process, we will be all exposed to that serious risks.
Out of 300,000 children up to 18 years of age in Fukushima Prefecture, 116 were diagnosed with thyroid cancer months after the nuclear plant disaster in 2011. Health experts say this is much higher than the normal rate. But after effects aren't limited to health issues.
Still, we have more than 100,000 people in evacuation. Okay? They are forced to live in shelters. Okay? So that impact of that evacuation is so huge. Nobody actually expected that the effects of the evacuation to have such a huge impact,
5 years later, many of those people have still been unable to return home. Some live in temporary housing units just outside the exclusion zone and that were only designed to last up to 24 months.
My son's family, my grandchildren evacuated far, far away. They won't come back. They have already settled there. There aren't any young people around here. I don't know a single child living in this zone.
There aren't any young people here, only old people like myself. Younger people will never come back to Fukushima. It'll just be us, the aged.
Tomio Kokuben has been studying the social impact the nuclear meltdown has left on the people of Fukushima. He says mass evacuation uprooted entire communities, divided families, and resulted in the loss of social support networks.
It's also had a profound impact on married couples. Mothers desperate to save their children from radiation poisoning evacuated far away. Men had to stay behind because they had jobs here. That collapsed families, and divorce rates soared in this area in the last 5 years.
One of the symbols of anti-nuclear movements in Japan is this tent at a small corner in Tokyo's government office district. It was erected immediately after the Fukushima nuclear disaster, and since then, rain or shine, day and night, there hasn't been a single day it wasn't occupied by protesters.
We want the world to know what happened in Japan because of nuclear plants and join an anti-nuclear movement. It's not just about Japan. Nuclear plants are all over the world. This is a global problem.
Nuclear energy is so unforgiving technology. Okay? It may take many years, but I think gradually, we have to expand the non-nuclear energy sources, to really, achieve a new balance of energy balance.
But apart from the few days around the March 11th commemorations when global media run features on papers and TV, Fukushima remains largely forgotten in the minds of most Japanese outside the region. 5 years since the world's worst nuclear accident in a quarter of a century, life seems back to normal here in the Japanese capital. Japan has even restarted some of its nuclear power plants as hundreds of thousands still continue to struggle to cope with the aftermath of the crisis. Is nuclear energy the only way out? It's a question not limited to this country. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is visiting the United States for the first time since taking office. Well, with more on this trip, Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me. Bruce, at least while President Barack Obama is in office, it looks like the two countries will enjoy very sunny relations.
Konyang, as one media agency has described the palling around in Washington so far, they called it a bromance between the two world leaders. There have been jokes about which country has the better beer, and musician Justin Bieber, of whom Trudeau called a popular Canadian export to the U.S. Trudeau has promised better cooperation with Washington and pledged joint steps to fight global warming, including cutting methane emissions from oil and gas operations. Obama called the visit a celebration of the values the two countries share, and Trudeau shared similar thoughts.
The idea that if you work hard and play by the rules, you can make it if you try, no matter what the circumstances of your birth.
May the special connection between our two countries continue to flourish in the years to come.
Trudeau's Liberals came to power last November and quickly won favor with the Obama administration, but Obama's time is running out in office and it's unclear who will replace him. The Republican nominee could very well be businessman Donald Trump, who's mused about tearing up the North American Free Trade Agreement. Trudeau declined to say what he would do if Trump became the next president.
Well, attention to detail is important in any line of work, but especially when you're trying to steal $1 billion, you want to give that second thought and double check your spelling. A group of unknown hackers failed to get away with all that cash just because, or partly because of a simple spelling error.
That's right. They got one thing right, Kanyang. They got the hacking part right. But according to officials at Bangladesh Bank, these unknown hackers breached their systems and stole credentials to make payment transfers. Now, before the slip-up, they managed to get away with about $80 million, which is still one of the largest known bank thefts in history. But it could have been much worse. The officials say the hackers were moving money from the bank's account at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York to entities in the Philippines and Sri Lanka. In one of the requests, the hackers misspelled the word foundation, setting off red flags with the routing bank. The officials say the Fed was also suspicious because of the large amount of transfer requests.
Well, obviously, Bangladesh isn't celebrating this Typo. $80 million they lost, and they plan to recover those funds.
Yeah, they're not happy about this, regardless of the transfers being stopped. According to one daily in Bangladesh, the government has said it plans to sue the U.S. Fed because that's where the money was coming from, and that's what they want to do to get that money back.
Well, I don't always fuss about spelling typos, but spelling is important.
It's important in every line of business, Kanyang.
All right, Breeze, thank you so much for today, all of this week, and we will see you next week.
No problem.
Well, not a single cloud was seen in the sky today, but as our Jihan warned us, it was one cold spring day. So for more on the latest, let's go over to our Jihan. Jihan, you look very spring today.
I know, I was gonna say, and I wanted to suggest our viewers to take out some of the bright and light clothes, just like the one I'm wearing right now. Anyways, as you said, it was a beautiful day with clean air, but surely it was cold and windy.
Right, so the cold snap was forecast to reach its peak today. So as you suggested that we take out our spring clothes, are we headed for warmer temperatures?
Definitely. So put away the thick and heavy coats this weekend. But tomorrow morning, we're going to wake up to a below freezing point here in the capital. But daily highs will return to seasonal average by tomorrow afternoon. But skies will not be as clear as today throughout the weekend here in Seoul. But starting next week, we'll enjoy beautiful spring conditions. It's going to get warmer and warmer under plenty of sunshine. And shortly there will be plenty of spring festivals going around, and I'll be sure to give you a heads up for that. Now, going back to the temperature readings for tomorrow, daily low here in Seoul will kick off at -3 degrees Celsius. Daejeon and Gwangju will also get up to -3, while Busan and Jeju wake up to 1 and 2. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will get up to 7, while Daegu and Busan will reach 10 degrees Celsius. But dry conditions are still prevailing in most parts of the country, so be sure to stay hydrated. Now that's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, all throughout my coverage in Japan, what I heard the most from the people of Fukushima was, please do not forget us, please remember us. Well, our thoughts and prayers are with all those affected by the tsunami and the nuclear meltdown on March 11, 2011, on this March 11, 2016, and our hearts go out to you. That is our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you as always for watching, and we hope to see you right back here tomorrow, or actually next week on Monday on NEWSCENTER.